Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Hardy, and welcome to Flip This Risk podcast, where high achievers share their stories about smart risk taking to help us break free from the crippling fears of risk. You can check us out at flipthisrisk.tv and flipthisriskacademy.com for training opportunities. And today I have very excited to have Rick Wade with me of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He's the Vice President of Strategic Alliances and Outreach. And the U.S. Chamber is the world's largest business organization representing the interests of more than 3 million businesses, all sizes, all sectors, and regions. So Rick, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks. Good to be here, Karen. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, you have a lot of accolades. You're Harvard educated, you're decorated with honorary doctorates, but you do come from a town known as Lancaster, South Carolina, where the town motto is "Forward Together." So I just want to start and ask you, how did that motto help to shape you as an individual and put you on the path that you have chosen for yourself?
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. And see, this is how we know you're not from Lancaster, because we pronounce it Lancaster, not Lancaster. It's such a very interesting, I guess, is our dialect from South Carolina. But, Forward Together is actually something that I have embodied my entire life. I grew up in Lancaster, which is in the rural part of South Carolina, in the era of segregation. And I remember vividly going to segregated schools and restaurants and movie theaters and doctor's offices. But it was where I found that I had teachers, being first generation to ever think about college, and my parents never went to college. We grew up, I guess, by societal standards in a poor family. But I had people who became role models and mentors, not just my teachers, but community leaders, both Black and white. Growing up in a segregated town. So when I think of Forward Together, I mean, I've moved forward because there were people who were together with me and who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I attribute all of my success and that things I've accomplished, and hopefully things that I will accomplish in the future, from those values that I learned from that small town of Lancaster, South Carolina.
That is incredible, and sound like you had a solid upbringing within the town, and where you were raised by a community, right? Usually, absolutely. You were raised by a community, and everyone had a positive influence on you. And even now, you are around the entrepreneurial energy all the time. So your engagement around the idea of opportunity is reinforced daily. But most people don't have that. So how can they establish a healthy balance between, their appetite for opportunity as well as their appetite for risk taking?
Well, and again, I think the way we started this conversation is very important. I became an entrepreneur out of necessity, and which is not different, particularly growing up and being a part of this African-American experience. I mean, we are very innovative and creative, and we have ingenuity, and our history speaks to that. There were great innovators and prolific innovators in the early 19th century. And so, I actually used to, while in middle school and high school, I worked odd jobs, sweeping floors at the local grocery store, cutting grass. Yeah. And I say that because out of necessity, that was a way for me to also provide for my family and to add to the offers what I could. So I used what I had to create my own business. And that is the entrepreneurial spirit that I think that we all have within us. The question is, do we tap into it, and do we actualize it and realize it? And again, I think that out of necessity breeds innovation and ingenuity. And I've been able to capture that spirit through my entire career. And now being at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the largest business organization in the world, I get a chance to work with young aspiring entrepreneurs every day and help to create this sort of pipeline for innovators and entrepreneurs that can solve complex problems facing our society and our country and our people.
So what is your relationship with risk taking? Based on your story you just shared with me, what would you say your relationship is? Because I'm on the mindset that how you relate to risk individually, it shows up in your business decision making, and your position is one of representation. So what is your relationship with risk taking, and what is the biggest risk you've ever taken?
Well, I think I think all of our lives, I mean, we don't think of risk management and risk taking. Oftentimes we think of it in a business construct, and we think about in the business construct, we think oftentimes about financial risk. But when you think about it in just in terms of our humanity, life is a risk. The question is, are you willing to step outside of your boundaries? And for me, that was a risk. Again, I point to because we started talking about where I grew up and how, but it was a risk to step out of what was defined as the Black or African American zone, if you will, in a segregated society. And I took a chance to veer to the other side. And that was a risk. I mean, people have lost their lives when you think about it for crossing boundaries. So for me, it is about are we willing to take the risk, to take the chance to cross boundaries and to learn and grow and build companies and build innovations that can not only be impactful to us in our own individual world, but that can change the world. That's what risk taking is all about. Yes, it's calculated risk, but some of this is that innate ability to be able to have vision and to be able to lead and to be able to take chances. And I think that's what life is all about, taking chances.
It is. But you have some companies out here, and we've seen companies that have thrived and others that have not. That, some leaders get paralyzed with the idea of making decisions and then having to deal with the risk or the outcome of that decision. So how has your response to risk, just like you explained, been reflected in your leadership skills? Because I believe that's really a key thing.
How's it been? I mean, you mean my individual?
Yeah, individual leadership skills. How has that been personified in the way you manage your organization or lead or manage people?
Well, again, I think companies that are willing to take risk, albeit calculated risk, are companies that are most successful. I'll give you an example. I mean, and I actually do put this in the category as you think of leadership of risk. I mean, one of the things that I'm leading at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is how do we help companies understand the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And the traditional model may have been that you, one, don't understand it, or you haven't taken the risk or taken the chance to embrace what diversity, equity, inclusion really means. But what research has shown is that companies that are more diverse, that are more inclusive, they are more innovative and they actually are more profitable. So, that is a risk for some companies. I mean, particularly in a society, in a world where we don't understand the human dynamics around race and equity. But the upside of that is the data shows that America is changing, that brown and Black people will be the majority of the population in years to come. So if I'm a company, I'm thinking of this, well, how do I position myself to be competitive in this new workforce of the future? That means making investments in 2020 that will yield positive results in 2055. And that's a risk. I mean, do you make that investment now, or do you make that investment later and miss the market opportunity to grow and expand into a world, a consumer market, a business ecosystem that is changing right before our eyes? And I think all of that is about being able to lean forward and imagine your company, the company you want to be, not the company that it is now. And that's a risk. And how do you manage a process and plan to get there?
Yeah, and thinking about the company that you have to be in order to survive for the future. That new organization, that new company that has to redefine the markets, redefine the economy. In fact, you spoke recently in an article about the new economy post COVID-19. What does this new economy look like, and what do businesses need to do differently to take advantage of it?
Well, it's a fascinating new place that we find ourselves. And, we use this term, the new normal, and I actually call it the temporary normal. I mean, because there's some things that we shouldn't take from the old normal into the new normal. And I think we need to be very, very cognizant of that. But I think, one of the things that COVID-19 and this pandemic has done, not just in the United States, but as we are aware around the world, is created a very unusual disruption in how we work, play, and live. But from this disruption will come new economies. I mean, what are the emerging companies? I'm working on doing some work now, particularly around Black businesses. How do we reimagine African-American owned enterprises in this whatever normal, whatever future that we have? For example, telework. I mean, a lot of people are afforded the opportunity to work from home. And how did that also translate into teleeducation, which we're seeing our college and universities, how we teach our students? Well, there are innovations that should come from that. I'm intrigued by, in that piece I did with Black Enterprise, barbershops. I mean, I found a study where some years ago, African-American barbers, the influence that they have, and there was research done around hypertension, that their influence when coupled with the medical prescription drugs, when used by Black men, hypertension dropped dramatically. Karen, I mentioned that for a reason, because one of the things that this pandemic has exposed in America, obviously, something that we've known for years, and that are the underlying healthcare disparities that exist and disproportionately impact people of color. Hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, et cetera. I myself, being a Black male with hypertension, we got to think about new ways and new approaches to solve these underlying structural disparities and underlying economic inequities. And I think that presents opportunities for our African-American owned businesses to innovate, to lean forward, and also help solve some of these tremendously challenging and difficult healthcare and other conditions that disproportionately affect us.
So how do we get them prepared? Not African-American businesses, businesses in general, right? Mm-hmm. The different sectors that may have been impacted by this, that these sectors aren't coming back stronger than they were before. So they have to reinvent themselves, reimagine themselves. How do we get folks prepared? In addition to education about managing risk, what are you suggesting? What are you looking at?
Well, a lot of it is education and information. I mean, paying attention to the trends and the markets. What are the new economies? I mean, what's emerging in healthcare at the moment? I started my career in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry and eventually at Blue Cross Blue Shield. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's the data showing? And one of the things that we got to understand is the need to have data to be more informed in decision making. And that in itself mitigates risk. And just leaning forward. I mean, how do we imagine new joint ventures and partnerships with big business that perhaps we've never seen before? And, again, I go back to that example of hypertension, but imagine if there were a barbershop partnership with CVS, and I'm only using CVS as an example, where you could create some interesting joint ventures that can be business related, but also impact our community. I mean, thinking about how you get prescription drugs and how do you get testing equipment to test for hypertension and diabetes into the barbershop communities? I know that sounds like strange and foreign, but one, it's a business opportunity. And secondly, it can be very impactful in terms of how we address these healthcare disparities. So it is education, it's information, it is the data, it is being informed, and also being willing to open up to new business models, whether they're joint ventures, whether they're acquisitions, they're merger opportunities. That we should be exploring in order to be sustainable in the months and years to come.
I tell you, it seems as though with the COVID experience, it really makes you think about how a new breed of leadership needs to take place. How would you describe the new leaders post-COVID-19 in industry?
I think leaders are those leaders who can see a bigger vision, again, of what their company needs to be as opposed to what it is today. Mm-hmm. I think leaders post-COVID are leaders who can lead with empathy and looking at these inequalities that exist. Because to the extent that these inequalities exist, they affect not only the people, but they affect your company. So it's sort of a new way of thinking. How do we use technology I think provides a competitive advantage for companies that will be successful in the future. The future of work, which is something we talk about often pre-pandemic. Well, what does it mean when your employees are just as much or more productive working from home than they are in the physical infrastructure? What does it mean as we have a considered path forward from the pandemic? You know, what's the environment, the working environment going to look like? Would the companies have the responsibility of providing PPE and mask and sanitizer and checking for temperatures? You got to lean in now to think about what that world would be like next year, pre-vaccine or post-vaccine. And I'm of the opinion that the way we live, work, and play perhaps will be changed forever. It may not be the world that we came from years ago. And we just got to imagine what this looks like and take advantage and seize the opportunities to be a part of that new design of our economy, in our country, in our world, as we move forward. And if I can parenthetically say something about, you'll hear me talk about our world. One of the things that we need to understand also, and when I was at the Department of Commerce, engaged in international trade and global markets, 95% of the world's consumers live outside of our borders, live outside the United States. So as we imagine the future, we should also be thinking, particularly as minority-owned enterprises and others, how do we compete globally? I mean, the old adage of why did the bank robber rob the bank? It's because it's where the money was. So for the consumers, 95% are outside of our country. So how do we design business models that in which we can connect with these consumers who are looking to buy our services and products around the world? Yeah,
being more of the producers, more so than the consumers ourselves, but being the producers of the
being the manufacturers and the producers of products and services, as opposed to just consumers.
So with COVID-19, we saw that a lot of research and studies that were done into the effectiveness or efficacy of telework has pretty much been thrown out of the window. The evidence has been in what we've been actually doing for the most part. Has productivity, would it suffer because of more telework, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm seeing some interesting data, I guess, to make the case that productivity in some instances has increased. But obviously, there are some jobs where teleworking is not an option. So you got to consider those jobs, essential workers and the frontline folks in healthcare. I mean, what about the folks who are working in frontline and retail and in grocery stores and pharmacies? So, but the option given where telework is applicable, I'm seeing some interesting data about an increase in productivity. But that one size doesn't fit all. I mean, and I think we recognize that. And if that is the case, how do we make sure that employees and communities and jobs in rural and some communities have access to broadband? So there's some other underlying structural issues that we need to make sure that are in place as we move forward in this new economy with regards to telework and the future of our workforce.
Absolutely. You know, I think we both agree and understand that uncertainty is just part of life. It just comes with the territory. But, you know, a lot of people are still crippled by the fear of taking a risk. They don't understand it, but it seems to be more heightened more now than ever. You know, there are things we know, there are things we don't know, but we can know. And then there's things we just don't know for the most part. How can we be assertive in this economy without becoming risk averse?
Well, you know, I think this thing called technology has made it more complicated, but made it easier. I mean, the reality is that any information you need is at a click away, and in this internet of things. And so, you know, we have access to the information we need. The question is, how do we mine that information, that data that we have access to make sound decisions? And on the other hand, I think one of the perhaps downsides in technology, as you know, is changing so rapidly. I mean, who would have, we used to have a saying in the South, who would have thunk?
Who would have thunk?
Right, who would have thunk? I mean, who would have that we would be communicating now on Zoom and transacting business the way we are in this post-pandemic or current post-pandemic world. And in technology, what does that technology look like in the future? I mean, somebody say the other day, we may be moving to a place where we have holograms. I don't know, but trying to reimagine how all this stuff works. But technology clearly is here to stay and is going to play a critical role in terms of how we engage each other, how we do our jobs, how we make products, deliver products and services to consumers and customers, and how do we mitigate our risk. I mean, technology and data is such a critical component to that design.
How much will instinct play in this too? I mean, we have access to data and information, but what about the part in terms of instinct moving forward with this? Has this whole experience made us think about the fact that there has to be some room for, we have to be ready for, what we once thought was impossible is now possible on both sides, good and bad?
Well, absolutely. And I think that is an attribute of leadership. I mean, leadership, those values of vision and instinct, what is the gut saying? And as well as what is morally right. I was in a conversation earlier about the diversity and equity and inclusion as we watch what is playing out in our country right now in response to this tragic incident in Minneapolis. And, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion within our companies and within our society. And, I think the moral case is just as important as the business case. And that is the values proposition. Who are we? I mean, are we really committed to building an inclusive society and an inclusive community that values everyone as an integral part of our business, as a part of our society? So yes, there is the data, there is the science, there is the understanding of markets, there is this issue of risk mitigation, but there also is this human component that we can never lose sight of. And that's a values proposition. What do we believe in? And who do we want to be as a business, as a company, as an industry, as an America, as a society, as a people of a common human race?
That is excellent. So in closing, what are some final thoughts that you have in terms of, with the Chamber of Commerce? What's some of the projects that you're working on to move things forward?
Well, I mean, obviously the Chamber in general, I mean, I can't think of any aspect of our economy or connected to business or society that we're not involved in. We're involved in it all. And that's why it's so exciting to be a part of the Chamber, this business organization that has such large footprint and impact. And that's everything from, we're trying to figure out a path forward to help businesses as they do reopen. As I mentioned earlier, what does that look like? I mean, not in terms of just the workforce and telework, but safety and precautions and liability as a result of COVID-19. We obviously engage with Congress and through our state and local chambers at the state and local levels, with legislators and policymakers on making sure that there's funding to keep our small businesses alive. So we're integrally involved in those conversations. We certainly are, a priority for us is what is playing out across the world, whether it's with China or India or supply chains. How do we imagine a future where we won't be in this place again, where we have a need and dependency on countries like China and others, when we need stockpiles of personal protection and equipment and ventilators. So all of this, I think the deck is being reshuffled, and the Chamber is a part of that. And I'll end by saying, I mean, the work that I am engaged in is, again, how do we build an inclusive economy? How are we making sure that everyone is a part of this new design that is being created right before our very eyes? And I believe that African-American businesses, Hispanic-owned, all businesses, being entrepreneurial and innovators, have an opportunity to be a part of this design structure. I want to make sure that the blueprint, that the field at least gives you an opportunity to play. And then it's up to you to win the game.
And what value does an understanding of risk management bring to the table for a business owner at this point in time when the tables are turning with pivoting greater opportunity?
Well, I mean, I think as we began, I mean, I think risk management is a part of everything we do. And certainly from the small business or any business, I mean, understanding that, risk management I think we have to be careful not to view that as it can oftentimes create a barrier to change and a
Right.
barrier to moving forward, that you become so risk adverse.
Exactly.
It's time to take risk. And again, you can manage your risk, you can calculate your risk, but this is also about your values. And can you see and have a vision for the future of your business and make some decisions that may not be data driven, but leads you forward into this new world, this new economy that is being developed and emerging right before our eyes. Rebooting, resetting, rethinking how you fit into this brave or not so brave world.
And reimagining, right?
And reimagining.
Oh,
It's all about
absolutely.
imagining. You can see it, you can believe it, and you can be it.
And you can be it. Absolutely. Well, Rick, I want to really thank you for spending time with me today and my audience to talk about this very critical subject and getting us prepared mentally, getting us with the right mindset to take advantage of what's in front of us. There's a lot of opportunity waiting before us, and to know that there's a table being set and we can sit there. We can be at that table when the blueprint is being established and have some say about what that looks like and be producers of the future, not just consumers of the future.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate the leadership of the Chamber of Commerce and the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you to everyone for checking in with Flip This Risk podcast. I'm Dr. Karen Hardy, and I'll catch you next time.
Thank you.